Hey everybody, welcome to Dorky Decisions. Normally our good DM Scott would be running the show, but it's my turn, and I want to paint you a word picture. The year is 1993. Bill Clinton is just sworn in as president. Jurassic Park is out in theaters. Rocko's Modern Life premieres on Nicktoons. And most importantly, Magic the Gathering is released to the populace. It is the first trading card game that immediately took off. It was immediately hugely popular with the right crowd. It was nerdy. It was expensive. And back in 1993, people were playing with beat up cards, and the game had ante where you would gamble your cards away. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about today is I have two very good friends of mine, Scott and Jack, and they, for the most part, have never played Magic the Gathering. Whereas me, I take that shit in the veins. I mean, I can just go over here and here's 100 cards that I just bought this week. Because I'm a nerd, and Magic the Gathering is one thing that I'm very good at. I say that humbly, but I very much enjoy it. It scratches an itch for competitive play, but at the same time, it builds friendships and it increases critical thinking by a lot. And you'll know what I mean in just a moment. But first, I want to say hi to my lovely guests. Scott, how's it going?
It's going great. It's kind of exciting for me to dive back into this. I played back in '93 when it first came out. I was a student in college at the time. A really good buddy of mine named James Manzi was a huge Magic the Gathering player, and he really wanted me to learn the game, and he taught it to me while we were working backstage at a theater. And I got really excited about it, being a gamer geek myself, being a D&D fan. But he then told me at the end how much a pack of cards cost, and I was a poor college student. So I decided to forego the potential addiction and never touch the game again. Sadly, I didn't learn the lesson because I ended up getting hooked on other collectible card games later on.
Wait a minute, didn't I get you hooked on HeroClix as well?
HeroClix, the Star Wars miniature battles.
Yep, we did that too.
All of those other things that have the same kind of collectability of them.
God, I'm the worst drug dealer.
Yeah, my problem is I'm a completionist, so I'd be the guy buying all the packs to complete the sets.
We'll talk about that in just a minute. But before then, Jack, how's it going?
Hey everybody. Well, I'll tell you what I know of magic. I'm a teacher, and at the middle school I teach in, the teacher across the hall is a magic fanatic, and she was trying to tell me, and she started spouting all this stuff that I had no idea of, and I said, sounds fun, but no thanks. And then somebody gave me this beautiful pack of cards, which I opened and looked at the pictures and then slipped back in. And that's as far as I've gotten in Magic.
Well, I am glad to lead you on this journey. And I'm going to start out simply. We're not going to get too deep into the rules just yet. The first thing I want to talk about is, as of October of last year, there are 27,000 different unique Magic cards. Every set doesn't have new ones, but yeah, there are 27,000 unique cards, which is incredible If you look back at the older cards, some of them are still seeing play. Some of them are too good. They're just flat out banned and what's called on the reserve list and will never get printed again. But the basis of Magic the Gathering is you are what's called a planeswalker. You are a very powerful mage whose spark has ignited, and you can use mana that you absorb from the environments around you to cast spells, to summon allies, to defeat other planeswalkers that you come across. I think the original idea was kind of like Highlander, like you met two planeswalkers across a battlefield and you would go at each other. Typically, back in the 90s, it was a one-on-one game. Right now, the most popular format, the format that I almost play exclusively now, is called Commander, is a 4-player format. And I'll go into the different formats in just a little bit. But back to what I was saying about mana. So you're a planeswalker, you travel the planes because of your spark. How you cast your spells is based off of the land, and the land produces a color. Plains produce white mana, islands produce blue, forests produce green, mountains produce red, and swamps produce black. And those are the 5 colors of Magic. Scott, if you could bring up the Magic color wheel that I sent you earlier.
The thing I forgot to prep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give me a minute.
Yeah. Simply put, you can break down the 5 colors of Magic. White is peace, law, structure, selflessness, and equality. Blue is knowledge, deceit, caution, deliberation, and perfection. Black is power, self-interest, death, sacrifice, and uninhibitedness. Red is freedom, emotion, action, impulse, and destruction. And green is nature, wildlife, connection, spirituality, and tradition. Based on that simple description, Jack, what color would you say Sliver is? If you were just based on that simple one lines.
Well, I can't remember most of what you said, but the one that, Sliver's magic is based a lot on deception and charming. So I guess I think the blue one was the one that had to do with like messing with people's heads.
Blue is very much about knowledge and deceit. Some of its primary mechanics are drawing extra cards. They have a mechanic called milling, where you take the cards from the top of your library and just put them directly in the graveyard. Here is what is called the color pie. And each color has its wedge. The 2 colors touching it are considered allied colors. The 2 colors opposite are the enemy colors. So if we take blue, for example, its allied color is white and black, and its enemy colors are green and red. Meaning that the ideals of that color are directly opposed by the actions of the other color. That doesn't mean they don't mix. It's just an easy way to put it. When you get into talking about multicolored things, you can say it's the enemy colored pairs, the allied colored pairs. The golden rule of Magic, though, and it's actually printed in the comprehensive rules as the very first rule. And I will read it directly. This is rule number 101.1 from the comprehensive rules. Whenever a card's text directly contradicts these rules, the card takes precedence. The card overrides only the rule that applies in that specific situation. The only exception is that a player can concede the game at any time. Basically, what that is saying is every rule that exists in Magic, there's a card that breaks it.
And
so,
if you have that card wins.
Yes. And also no, because there's a card that breaks every rule, there's also a card that breaks the rule that was just created. And that's when you get into what's called the stack and layers. And I was a level 1 judge a few decades ago. But to get to a level 2 judge, you have to be able to understand in-depth layering, like at what layer something affects the game state. And that's getting way too complicated for you guys. So what we're going to do, so I can show you the anatomy of a magic card, we're gonna pull it back. And I know that both of you are Lord of the Rings fans.
Yep.
Recently,
I think Scott might be.
A little bit. Recently, Wizards of the Coast decided to branch out. Originally, Magic was its own universe, its own property, and people would, make fan cards of, oh, it'd be so cool if Luke Skywalker was a Magic card. Here's what I would say it is. Well, WotC decided, you know what? Let's do something called Universes Beyond. Universes Beyond has since released Warhammer 40k cards, Doctor Who cards, My Little Pony cards, Transformers cards, and the best-selling Magic set of all time, Lord of the Rings.
Ooh.
Wow.
Okay, yeah.
That's huge.
You just hooked us pretty quick.
Well, I mean, the guy with the Narsil tattoo, yeah. I think you hooked me pretty fast with that.
They also did it was supposed to be a crossover with Baldur's Gate 3, but because of the whole pandemic thing, they got released at different times. So the characters in Baldur's Gate 3 do have Magic cards, but they came out 2 years ago. Anyway, let's go over the anatomy of a Magic card with our good friend, Frodo Baggins. Which Scott is bringing up now. Now, there are 3 or 4 different versions of Frodo, and I chose to go with the monocolored one to break it down as easy as possible. So, Magic cards starting from top to bottom, left to right. At the top left, you have the name of the character. Frodo, comma, determined hero. Now, if there was another Frodo, it could be Frodo, comma, Scott is awesome, or Frodo, comma, Jack's the best. The important part is the first name. The secondary part is just finishes the title.
Now that title can't just with that differentiation, could you have all 3 of those Frodos in your deck?
I'm glad you asked that. Yes. It's one of the rules that I don't really like that they changed. So Frodo is a legendary creature. Going below the picture, it does say legendary creature. All that means is you can only have 1 copy of that specifically named card. So you can only have 1 Frodo determined hero on your side of the battlefield.
Got it.
And that was a rules change recently. It used to be you could only have 1 on the battlefield entirely. So if you had a Frodo determined hero and Jack played a Frodo determined hero, they would both vanish because you can't have 2 of them. Which
Ooh.
I thought was cool. They took that away because they didn't want people to go to Wizard Play Network events with their deck and not be able to play it because someone's playing the same level deck.
Right.
Now,
especially when you start theming things around Lord of the Rings or Transformers or whatever, everyone's going to want an Optimus Prime. Everyone's going to want a Gollum, whatever, right? Yeah, I get that.
The next part of the card that is probably the most important is that number at the top right. You have a 1 and then what looks like a little starburst. That is the symbol for white mana. So in order to cast this spell, you must have mana of 1 from a plains and 1 from any other source. So you could cast it with a plains and a mountain, or a plains and a swamp, or a plains and an item that taps for mana. How you get mana is once on your turn, you may play a land from your hand onto your battlefield. And as I mentioned before, every rule is broken. So there are 900,000 effects that say you can play an additional land. But In the most fair way, it is you draw a card, you play one land. So on turn 1, you should have 1 land. On turn 2, you should have 2. And that way, you ramp up. It's a lot like the game Flux, if you guys have played it.
Mm-hmm.
You start out with that draw 1, play 1. Draw 1, play 1. Well, as soon as the rule changes and you play a card that says you may play an additional land on your turn, or go search your library for a land and put it on the battlefield, well, now you're ahead.
So that's a mechanic you might build into your deck.
Absolutely.
Now, can you build a mechanic like that into your deck and have it affect your opponent?
There are a few ways to do that. One of my favorite decks in Commander is called Turbo Fog. And how my Turbo Fog deck works is we're all going to draw a bunch of cards. And you guys are going to attack each other. And I'm going to cast spells that are called fogs. So if you attack me, we're going to do no damage at all. So while we're drawing a bunch of cards, I'm building up my hand of fogs. You guys are killing each other. And then once there's only one left, I pick you off. I give you the resources to kill each other, and then I come in from behind. One of my favorite decks, one of my favorite strategies, and there's hundreds of them.
Sure.
Moving down the picture, the picture doesn't matter. It could be anything. A lot of people get altered cards, change the picture. As long as the text does not change, or it is understood what the card is. Like, everyone knows what... anyone that's been playing for Commander for a little bit knows what a Soul Ring does. Costs 1 mana, taps for 2. The most broken card in the entire world, and it's in every deck. But that's another digression. Right below the picture, though, you have the type line. The type line tells you it could be a creature, an instant, a sorcery, an enchantment, an artifact, a planeswalker. I think that's all the types. And I know this is a lot of information that I'm throwing at you. I don't expect anyone to remember this. I'm just trying to power through it. But the type line tells you what type of spell it is, and in the case of a creature, you have subtypes. Here we have Frodo is a creature. He's a legendary creature, so you can only have one of him on the battlefield at a time. And he's a halfling warrior. There are cards that say, if you control another halfling, or warriors you get +1/+0. So it checks that subtext line for other effects. We're going to skip the paragraphs. Below it, you have the italicized part. That is just flavor text. So here we have Frodo's heart flamed within him. He drew his sword and advanced. Line straight from the book.
Right.
And then at the bottom right, you have his power and toughness. When you are attacking with a creature, you declare attackers. You say, okay, I'm attacking Jack with Frodo Determined Hero. And I turn him sideways. That indicates that I am attacking with this creature. If he is not blocked, he will deal 2 damage to Jack because of his power. If he is blocked, let's say Jack blocks him with a 2/2. They will kill each other because they both have 2 toughness. If Jack were to block with a 2/3, Jack's creature would survive, my 2/2 creature would die. Make sense? It's all a numbers game. And in general, once you move turns, that damage falls off, so it's not like your 2/3 suddenly becomes a 2/1 for the rest of the game. And again, there's a rule that breaks that. No matter what I'm telling you, there's a rule that breaks it.
Sure.
So basically, don't listen to you.
That's general good advice. I mean,
but the base mechanic is always where you start, and then you alter the rules from there based on the cards.
So, in fact, Frodo's card here alters the base mechanic. It says whenever Frodo Determined Hero enters the battlefield or attacks, you may attach target equipment you control with mana value 2 or 3 to Frodo. Typically, excuse me. Typically, an equipment has an equip cost, and they can only be equipped at sorcery speed, which means not during combat, or not on someone else's turn. But when he attacks, you can immediately slip Sting on him because he's attacking and whips out Sting at instant speed. And as long as it's your turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Frodo. So, on your turn, he's really hard to kill. He's really hard to get rid of. And that's represented with, he's wearing Mithril.
Right.
Let's go to Gimli.
Gimli, you say? All right.
Because you never toss a dwarf. You never toss a dwarf.
There's Gimli.
All right. So, Jack, what is this card's name?
It's Gimli, counter of kills.
Perfect. And Scott, what is the mana cost of this card?
Ooh, this is a trick question, but I think it's 4. Is it 3 of any type, and then one?
Yes.
And then one of whatever that symbol is that I haven't been taught yet.
Since the card frame itself is red, it's a red card.
Okay.
So,
red.
it would be you would tap a mountain and 3 of any color.
Okay.
He is a legendary.
Red equals mountain. Just clarifying that.
Yes.
Okay.
White equals plains, red equals mountain, blue equals island, black equals swamp, and green equals forest.
Okay.
Gimli, counter of kills, legendary creature, dwarf warrior. He has what's called an evergreen ability. You'll note that word trample at the top, and there's no rules text behind it. Evergreen abilities are abilities that you're just expected to understand because they're basic rules of the game. So as you're learning, you will learn trample means if I block Gimli with something with only 1 toughness, the extra damage rolls over to the player. So if I block something with only 1 toughness, he's a 4, it'll block 1, and the 3 goes to the player. And that's just an evergreen word, trample.
So, how much toughness does the player start with?
That is a great question. It depends on the format that you're playing. Okay. In typical one-on-one games, standard, limited, pioneer, modern, all these formats that are constructed formats, one-on-one, you have 20 life. In the format I like, Commander, you have 40 life. But that's because it is a much bigger game.
Right.
Instead of a 60-card deck, you have 100 cards.
You said that was a 4-person game.
Yes.
And
you have 4 people playing.
Is that 4 separate armies? Like 4 separate decks?
Yep. You bring your own to the table.
So it's not 2-on-2. It's actually... a 4-way battle.
Free for all. Mm-hmm.
The battle of 4 armies. They got it wrong. It's supposed to be the battle of 5 armies.
You could play 5. I've played 5. I think it's... honestly, I opt out of 5-player Commander games because they become a slog.
Yeah,
they take so long. I mean, even a 4-person Commander game, at minimum, you're looking at an hour commitment.
Right.
And playing against me, you're probably looking at a 2 to 3 hour commitment because, of course, I play control, so I'm going to control how the game plays all the time. My friends hate me.
Right.
As well they should.
I'm glad Gimli to see that translates from D&D to Magic the Gathering.
It's like there's a common denominator somewhere. So whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, Gimli, counter of kills, deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. So this ability is not just whenever he kills a creature. It's whenever a creature dies. So you could have, there's a very basic card for 1 red called Lightning Bolt. Deal 3 damage to any target. So I'm looking at Frodo at the other side of the table and I go, Lightning Bolt Frodo. Frodo has 3 damage marked on him. His toughness is 2. So Frodo goes to the graveyard. And then Gimli has a triggered ability that says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, Gimli deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. So now I've killed Frodo and I've dealt a damage to you.
Now,
so the controller is a planewalker, right? Who is basically
yes. Mm-hmm.
Who start with 20 health.
Right.
Yes.
So if we're playing Commander, and let's say the three of us were playing, and Sean, one of our other Dicey decision players.
Well, we've got Amanda in chats, but I doubt Amanda would ever play.
Perfect. So
I really regret the fact that they didn't call it Commando.
So we sucker Amanda into playing with the three of us who are playing Commander.
Yeah.
And I've got Gimli on the table, but Jack does damage to Justin's characters. My Gimli triggers.
Absolutely. So let's say Jack is playing Sauron, which we'll get to later, and he does a spell that destroys all creatures on the entire battlefield. Because Gimli was on the battlefield when that spell resolved, he triggers for every creature that died.
Including himself?
No, because it's whenever a creature an opponent controls.
Oh, right. Got it.
There are cards that include themselves, though. But if someone has, let's say, it's called a go wide strategy, they make a lot of little dudes, and suddenly you wipe the board, Gimli triggers for each one, and you machine gun them down.
Got it.
So here we have Gimli counter of kills, saying, 21, cried Gimli. He hewed a two-handed stroke and laid the last orc before his feet. Now my count passes Master Legolas. Well, let's take a look at Legolas counter of kills.
Let's look at Legolas. All right, there he is.
With Legolas, I want to get into something I didn't discuss previously, and Legolas is a great example. With each color, you have a typical creature type. Some creatures will specifically show up in certain colors. Elves show up primarily in green, sometimes in blue, sometimes in white. But primarily, a elf is going to be green. In Lord of the Rings set itself, they did a lot of blue with the elves, because in Lord of the Rings, the elves were like the source of all knowledge and reason. So blue just made sense. Here we have Legolas counter of kills, who also has not one, but two triggered abilities. But before them, he has another one of those evergreen called Reach. Now, if you were to, not knowing anything about the game, what would you say, Scott, Reach does?
Knowing what I think of it from RPGs is it lets you have longer distance to attack. So maybe if there's in this game, I don't know exactly what that would be, but maybe you can attack someone whose turn it's not, or something. I don't know.
It's a good guess. Jack, what do you think?
Well, I would have to say that there are ranges of distance that you can affect, and this guy can just step right over that distance. But I haven't seen anything come up with a range of attack.
There's only two ranges. There's flying and not flying.
Oh.
Typically, flying can only be blocked by flying. Reach is one of those things that breaks that rule. Reach characters can block things that are flying. So Legolas can shoot a bird out of the air.
Right.
Reach is very important, and blocking flyers is one of the things that a lot of people forget, is that flying evasion is what it's called. Any type of evasion, unblockable, flying, menace is another one, makes it harder for your opponents to stop your creatures from dealing damage. Because, of course, the goal is to win, and you win by getting their life down to 0. And I say that, and of course, what's the golden rule? Every rule is broken.
Right.
There's like 10 other ways to win. But the primary way, the draw one, play one way, is get their life total to 0. Legolas has two other triggered abilities. Whenever you scry, what scry means is you look at the top card of your deck, and you say, okay, This is either a good card or a bad card. It either goes on top or goes on bottom. You can untap him and do it only once per turn. Which you can set up when you're tapped. You can't block, so you can set up things to scry off your turn to suddenly untap him and block someone to do kind of tricks. And then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on Legolas. Kind of similar to Gimli, only he gets bigger when creatures die. So if you paired them together in, say, a 3-colored deck that can have green, blue, and red, anytime a creature dies, Gimli hits its opponent, and Legolas gets bigger, gets more proficient, shoots arrows faster. He goes from a 2/3 to a 3/4 to a 4/5 to a 5/6, and if you killed 10 creatures, he's suddenly a 12/13.
Now, playing live in person, do you play with little counters?
I use little D6 dice.
Okay.
I do have a few times where you need bigger than D6. You can either double up the D6s, you can use a D20 or a spin down D20. I like using D12s because they're the best die. They're the redheaded stepchild of dice. But any kind of counter, you could even, there's something called food tokens, and I was playing against my friend Gary, and he was it was Halloween, the day before Halloween. He was putting a Reese cup down every time he made a food token, and anytime he spent a food token, he ate the Reese cup. As long as you can represent it and everyone at the table understands what the representation is, that's all that matters.
Right.
Why don't you pick a character?
Oh, all right. I mean, I kind of have to go with this one.
Yeah, let's finish up the fellowship.
Gotta go with Aragorn.
Aragorn, company leader. Now, much to both of your surprise, because I know you gentlemen pretty well, there was a backlash because Aragorn in this image is black.
I heard that. I had heard about that coming out when this set came out, and I think it's absolutely rubbish and ridiculous. But
the backlash meant nothing because, as I said before, this was the best-selling Magic set of all time.
Exactly, and I'm sorry, it's an artist's rendition of a character.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So I don't want to dig through all of the rules here. I just want to showcase them because I would like to talk more about playing the game. So I just want to go through these. Aragorn, company leader. To cast him, you need to tap a forest, a plains, and one of anything else. So you need to have individually a forest and individually a plains. There are lands that tap for multiple colors, but they only tap, for the most part, if you have a land that taps for green or white, you can only choose green or white. It can't do both.
So I know you didn't send me any of these examples for us to look at as far as land cards.
Mm-hmm.
But does each set come with their own land cards as well?
Yes, everything has basic lands, which are the plains, the mountains, the forest, all those. There's also what are called non-basic lands, and there's hundreds. There's so many different ones at different quality, at different rarities.
But do they? I mean, the collector in me is thinking, can I get Fangorn Forest? Like, do they break the lands down just like they break the characters down? Do they theme the lands at all?
Ooh, hold on. Let me see if I have one readily available. This is my Lord of the Rings collector's box.
Nice.
So let's see.
God, I'm gonna spend so much money.
Lord of the Rings actually had one of my favorite lands, and I don't know if this is going to show up. It's a map of Middle-earth.
Oh, nice.
And that's the island. Let me see if I can turn off my blurring. I don't know if I can do that while I'm live. Voice and video, none.
Well, there are lots and
There we go.
lots of named places in Lord of the Rings, so it would be pretty easy to just, name 30 different blue ones and 30 different green ones, etc.
Yeah, I just wondered if they had specific cards for them.
I'm looking because there absolutely is. Treason of Isengard.
Because it would make sense that, like, certain lands from a set would
Here's the
also
Great
have,
Hall of the Citadel.
would have certain power, right? So it's got rules underneath it as well, right?
Absolutely. There's Minas Tirith. I know that. There's the Shire.
That's a land
The Shire is a land, yes.
with mana.
It taps for plains, so it taps for white, but it also has additional build. I think it's plains. Sitting here looking at my expensive ones. Samwise.
But you could make your own in at any time, right? As long as you don't put crazy numbers at the bottom. You have to follow a formula, I'd guess.
Typically, custom cards are not legal in play. What you can do is you can take a card that's already similar to what you want to make and just say, hey, here's an altered version with art. It's really this card.
So if, like Peter Jackson, they left Tom Bombadil out of the set, and I really wanted a Tom Bombadil card, I could find another card of another creature from another set and just call it Tom Bombadil, as long as it played by the rules of Magic the Gathering. Then all of a sudden I've got a Tom Bombadil.
Indeed. Except they did make Tom Bombadil.
Of course they did, because they should have. But I was just digging on Peter Jackson there for a little bit.
And one of the very first things when this set was released, I had always wanted to make a commander deck based around a card called Sagas, because Tom Bombadil's a storyteller.
Sure.
Well, he is a Saga commander that is 5 colors, so he's all colors, so he can play any Sagas. And I actually don't play him very much because it gets out of control, and it's kind of oppressive. So I go in like, okay, are we talking powerful decks? No? Okay, Tom goes away.
So now, right. So let me ask you this, though. When you're playing now and you decide, are the tournaments themed, like a Lord of the Rings tournament, or are you theming the deck and choosing to play a Lord of the Rings deck?
So we do that. The decks come in pre-constructed. They make pre-constructed commander decks. So we each bought one of the Lord of the Rings pre-constructed decks, and we only played Lord of the Rings against each other.
Got it.
And we actually, my playgroup, all have those decks still original, no cards changed. It's Lord of the Rings cards only. Now I also have a Smeagol deck that is my own, that I built myself, that is not only Lord of the Rings cards. It's a lot of cards that synergize with what Smeagol does.
Right. But
because even though it's Lord of the Rings, it's still Magic mechanics, so you can mix and match.
Right, but now when you're talking some that's like you and your friend group decided to keep a Lord of the Rings specific deck. But will tournaments decide and say you can only pull from certain sets for this tournament?
They kind of went away from block constructed, which is what that is, like, because they don't do blocks anymore. Block was a mechanic, or not a mechanic, a release schedule where you'd go to a plane, say, one of my favorite planes is Innistrad, which is very gothic horror themed. You would have 3 sets released in sequence of Innistrad, and that would be a block. And block constructed would be, okay, you can only use cards from these 3 sets. Which I loved, but they did away with blocks to go churn through planes faster, to sell more cards, And honestly, their release schedule is just so out of whack now. Even the big time YouTubers and commenters are just fed up with how fast product is coming out. Because WotC got bought by Hasbro, and in the end, Hasbro only wants to make money.
Right, right. They're about the churn, not about the health of the game,
Right.
and
Same with
the
D&D
players' desires. Right,
Yeah.
the players' desires are to spend some time in a set, and that doesn't sell more products, so therefore
Yeah.
they don't
By
follow
the,
it. Right.
by the time that a set releases, there has already been previews started for the next set.
So, on the same note, and I was thinking of this question earlier, and this is kind of a good time to ask it because it's the same topic. Just like you have Dungeons and Dragons players that don't move on from their favorite edition or go back to an older edition because they love it. Are there groups that are playing with super, 20-year-old sets only because they liked the game the way it was at that point in time?
There's actually something I want to do, and I don't know if we have Katie Combat watching. Shout out to Cardboard Combat. They are an amazing Magic the Gathering streamer and very close friends of mine. I've known them for years and years and years and played video games with them for years and years and years. But I want to get with them and make a deck. It's called Pre-DH because Commander was originally called EDH after Elder Dragon Highlander. Pre-DH is only cards that came out before a certain set and before. Because the game has significantly changed and significantly ramped up in power.
Right.
And this is the point that people identified, okay, this is when the cards started getting printed exactly for Commander. So it kind of took the spark away of Commander, because now cards are specifically saying, okay, if you control your commander, do this extra stuff.
Right. So people who are more interested in not playing Commander and going back and just playing the one-on-one games might rather the EDH because it doesn't have that power creep that the multiplayer version caused.
EDH is the multiplayer. It's just pre the release of WotC putting out their own commander decks.
Got it.
Those pre-constructed commander decks is when people say that's when Commander changed. And that's in fact when Wizards of the Coast decided to name it specifically Commander. Because before then it was EDH, Elder Dragon Highlander, which was a fan-made format created by Sheldon Minery, rest in peace. He just recently died of cancer. So rest in peace. You were an awesome dude. And completely fan-made, fan-regulated, until Wizards caught the scent of money. And they went, okay, everyone loves this format, and because it's a singleton format, they're going to buy more product because they need one card. They need 100 cards. Each one is individual. There's no duplicates.
Wow.
So you're going to buy more product.
So I've got a question for you. You talk about building a deck. Does building it mean... So first of all, you're probably putting together things that work, that synergize, right? They build off of each other, or they spark off of each other. But can you just take the most powerful stuff and just put it in a... Like, what does a... How do you build a deck? Are there rules to it?
There are. So if we're talking standard format, the rules are it has to be at least 60 cards, and there can be no more than 4 of any card except for basic lands.
Okay, hold on. So I've got this deck that I showed you. Is that a full, like, is this even 60 cards? Could I play with this?
I can't
Probably
tell
not.
because it's in a box.
Yeah, but it doesn't even feel like enough to play a game.
A lot of those
exactly 60.
A lot of those intro boxes that you see there, they're free promotional giveaways. They might be 40 cards. And those are fine when you're learning to play, but they're going to be very underpowered when it comes to actually playing against someone.
Right. Gotcha.
Even that versus a deck that is a pre-constructed 60 card deck that they say is tournament ready, that's going to have 4 of every card, so you have more consistency with your draws. And that's when you break it down to its most fundamental level. This is a numbers game. This is a game about statistics. What are my odds of drawing this one card? What are my odds of getting my 4th land on turn 4? Well, then you have to get into, okay, if I need 4 lands on turn 4, statistically I'm going to need X number of lands versus X number of non-lands. And then you add in your... Katie Combat just shouted out in chat, says, I can't listen to audio, but you're doing great!
Nice.
But yes, it's a numbers game when you're building a deck. And I just mentioned that I just bought 100 cards. Well, Commander, each deck is 100 cards, so you can bet I built a new deck. There was a mechanic I was interested in. I saw it on a stream. Someone was playing a card, and was like, oh, that's a really neat... Like, I could see that being really useful, and it's built around the mechanic of tapping your opponent's creatures. When I tap your creature, I get to draw a card. Or when I tap your creature, my guy gets bigger. Or when I tap your creature, I tap another creature. So it's 100 cards based around this tapping mechanic. Mm-hmm. So I went, and there's all sorts of resources, all sorts of websites that can... you can do advanced searches and find... Okay, I want to find anything that says tap your opponent. Look for those 3 words. Tap your opponent. And then I just went through those cards and scrolled through, and I'm like, okay, this one's neat, this one's neat, this one's powerful.
And now, were you picking those and dropping them into a cart on a website and buying them individually?
It's less embarrassing to say yes to that than to say that I went to 4 different vendors to get all the cards because some didn't have them.
Right. Because of rarity and all that.
Rarity. One of the cards has actually only been printed once, and it was back in the late 90s. So I had to find a vendor that had it. And like even the one I bought is heavily played, so it's going to have creases in it or a scratched up back. But you put them in a sleeve, and
I mean, our audience may not know this, that Justin has children, but if you ever like disown your children, just leave me your cards in your will, because I'm betting there's a lot of money in those cards.
Katie Combat asks in chat, which card was that? It was Righteous Fury. Righteous Fury says destroy all tapped creatures, and you gain 2 life for every creature destroyed this way. So when you pair that with something that says, like, tap all your opponent's creatures, you wipe the entire board and gain a whole bunch of life.
All right. You alluded to it earlier, so I'm bringing it up because I gotta hear what this thing can do.
Tom Bombadil?
No, Sauron.
Okay, bring Sauron up. Sauron the Dark Lord. So there are multiple versions of Sauron. I chose this one because he's the big bad. This is the big bad Sauron.
I see that numbers-wise at the bottom tells me that just alone.
Yeah. He's a 7/6, so he's a beefy boy, got a big butt, as they say. But he also costs 6 mana.
Right.
3 colorless, a blue, a black, and a red. So you have to have 3 of those individual plus 3 more. The important part, and one thing that we haven't discussed, is another one of those evergreen mechanics called Ward. Ward says anytime you target this creature, counter that spell unless you pay the ward cost. Normally, the ward is like 1 mana, 2 mana. Sauron's ward is a ridiculously overpowered sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature. So just to target him, you've got to throw Gimli in the trash.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Legolas just pitches Gimli over his shoulder and says, "Here, eat my friend, and so I can take a shot at you." That's funny.
He also has a mechanic that anytime an opponent casts a spell, amass orcs 1. Amass is a mechanic that came out with the Amonkhet block, I believe, where you would amass zombies. It basically means I make a token that's a 0/0, and every time I amass, I put a 1/1 counter on it. So it's an army that just keeps getting bigger. Now, in a 4-player commander game with multiple spells every turn, that amassed orc army is going to ramp up really quick.
Now, you're not getting Sauron out early.
You would think that.
I mean, I'm staring at 7 mana to get him out.
6 mana.
Or 6 mana to get him out, right? But there are some decks that get mana out really fast.
Oh, yes. If we're talking, there's a format of Commander called CEDH, which is competitive EDH. Plays all the fast mana cards. There are cards that, for 0 mana, tap for 3. Now,
so
it doesn't.
If it's a red that does that tap for 3, I take that as one of my reds and 2 of my any.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's a card called Jeweled Lotus. It's a 0-cost artifact that you can tap and sacrifice it to add 3 color to cast your commander. So
let me ask you this. Oh, go ahead and finish your.
So let's say my opening hand is a Jeweled Lotus, we'll say City of Brass, which taps for any color, and it deals you 1 damage to do it. A Soul Ring, a Mana Crypt. I can now, conceivably on turn 2, have 8 mana available. So, yes, in a typical game, Sauron will not come out on turn 2. He won't come out on turn 3. Are there instances when you'll see him that early? Absolutely.
Sure.
Again, like I was saying, there's always an exception to a rule.
And that's also dependent on, did you get the draw you needed to make those conditions happen?
Right. The perfect hand, you're talking drawing 7 cards out of 100.
Right. Right.
Or 99 because your commander doesn't go in the deck, but that's regardless.
Cool.
Shut up, Katie. She says first turn discard him, second turn reanimate him.
Of course. Of course there's a way to bring him in early.
Oh yes, there's absolutely a reanimate mechanic.
Nice.
Jack, you had a question?
I did. So let's say you've got this amazing card like this guy, who's really hard to kill. Is there a little guy, just like his nemesis? Like, if this card comes out, it's only 1 in 100, but this is the only guy who can stab Sauron in the back of the foot, or the Witch King in the back of the foot, and it'll kill him instantly. Is there like an instant nemesis for all these big bads?
So, it's not really an instant nemesis for a specific card, but there is one of those evergreen keywords called Death Touch. Death Touch says if you deal at least 1 damage to a creature, destroy it. So, if we're talking, there's a 1/1 spider with Death Touch for 1 green mana. Sure, Sauron is a 6 mana powerhouse, but I've got a 1/1 spider on my side, untapped. You cannot attack me with Sauron, or I will kill Sauron.
Okay.
And that ward specifically is targeting Sauron. If I have an effect that says target player sacrifices a creature and Sauron is the only creature, they've got to sacrifice it. Or a spell that says destroy all creatures on the battlefield. That's not targeting, so it works.
Also, it seems that if Legolas kills enough people, he'll level up right past Sauron real quick and just take him out.
Absolutely.
Right. So there are
There's
ways.
even the biggest, baddest, nasty in all of Magic, which we're getting into cosmic horrors called Eldrazi. There's ways around them. It's hard. The most expensive Magic cards, mana-wise, are 13 mana, 14 mana, like massive. Which, if you're playing the typical draw one, play one land Magic, you're waiting till turn 14 to drop that guy.
Right.
And that's if you hit your land drop every single turn.
Right. Which you likely won't, statistically speaking.
Right.
That's crazy. So, all right. So, as someone who's way more into story, even when it comes to games like D&D, than I am into the mechanics. Don't get me wrong, I understand the rules and whatnot. I understand this is a numbers game. It's a statistics thing. I totally get all of that. Can you build a deck that tells a story and enjoy playing it competitively? Or do you have to acquiesce to the numbers?
There's a stigma around that word competitively.
I don't know these words, so if I offend,
right.
I don't mean to offend.
It's not stigma offense, but there's different levels of competitiveness. Like, are you talking traveling to an event, sitting down at a wizard certified event, paying money for entry and playing? Can you play just a goblin deck where you have only goblins? Absolutely. Could you win? Maybe. Is it likely? Probably not. Goblins is a bad example. Goblins always wins. But
but I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Like,
I want to play, they're called tribal decks. I want to play Sphinx Tribal. My deck is full of Sphinxes. Sphinxes are not a very good creature, but they do cool things. And if you're talking competitively, like if you, myself, Jack, and Katie in chat, yes, I'm sorry, tribal decks are now called typal decks. They're getting away from the word tribal. If the four of us sat down and we decided, okay, we're going to play Commander, bring whatever you want. It's not going to hurt to play. I have a friend that plays, they're called group hug decks. They're not meant to win. They're just supposed to make the game more enjoyable for everyone. Mm-hmm. They let everyone draw more cards. They let everyone do more stuff. There's more mana.
So there is a world in which, depending on who you're playing and what ground rules you set as a group, there is a world in which if I say, hey, like you and your friends did, let's keep our Lord of the Rings deck, let's just play Lord of the Rings, and I want to build a Hobbits only deck or something like that, right? I want to theme my deck to be all about the Shire and Hobbits. It may not be the most advantageous deck, but amongst a group of friends, it's likely I could still enjoy the game.
Yes, that is actually...
Or is the game now evolved and designed more towards optimization?
That's where the divide is. So, in Commander, which is why I love playing Commander, yes, you absolutely come to my table with a Hobbit deck. I would love to see what kind of crazy spells you found that fit the theme.
Right.
That would absolutely be a great time. And that's one of the great things about Commander is people are pulling out these cards. I mean, Magic, this is the 30th anniversary of Magic the Gathering. Magic is 30 years old this year. That's, again, I said 27,000 unique cards. Just this past game I played, someone played a card and I went, what? And I had to pull it up on another website and read it. And I was like, this is an actual card? Like, you made that up. No, it absolutely is a card. I had never seen it before. It did some weird stuff that 9 times out of 10 in 9 times out of 10 decks would do nothing.
Right.
But it synergized exactly with what he wanted to do.
with what he wanted to do in that moment
Right.
in the game.
And it was so cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
And like Katie says, it all depends on your play group. And that's you build a community. You have some friends. Like locally here, there is a Friday Night Magic that plays Commander. I've gone once. I love Magic the Gathering.
You've gone once
I've gone
because
once.
those people are not your people.
Correct.
Yeah, just like any D&D, just like any of our hobbies that we have.
Love you too, Katie. Bye. Thanks for stopping by.
Just like any of the hobbies that we're all working around and experiencing. There are some that they're the people you want to game with, and then the people you don't. I get that.
Right. And a decade ago, I was traveling. I would load up my SUV with other Magic the Gathering nerds, and we would travel to Atlanta, to Raleigh, and we would play in these big 100-person tournaments. And we would stay in a hotel room, 6 guys in a hotel room, slinging cards, practicing all night. Get up in the morning, grab the hotel pancake breakfast, and then spend 13 hours in a convention center with a bunch of sweaty neckbeards to try and win prizes. Have I ever gotten close? The closest I got was I was at the top 10 table in round 4 of 17. So I at least had a winning record up to that point, and then I just got decimated on the back end. But usually, people like me who drive and have fun and play for fun, they go to these tournaments to be the teammate. So I would bring the person that's on my team that's winning. I'd bring them snacks. I'd check on them. I'd go play side events. I'd come back. Hey, how you doing? What's your record? Can I get you anything? Go play side events. That was my role, and that's what I like to do.
Sure.
Now, what I like to do is to get some friends together, play Commander, which is just a 100 card format where you have a single legendary creature that's in what's called the command zone. Like, for instance, we have Sauron on the screen. Sauron is my commander. So Sauron is 1 of 100. Now I need 99 cards to fill up the rest of the deck. And what makes Commander interesting, to me at least in deck building, I can only put cards in the deck that match my commander's color identity. What is Sauron's color identity?
Looks to be...
Well, there's no gold, is there?
No.
It looks to be blue, red, and...
Black. Correct. So in my Sauron deck, I can only have blue cards, black cards, red cards, or a mix thereof. I can have blue-black cards, I can have red-blue cards, but I cannot have any white cards, and I cannot have any green cards.
In the whole deck.
In the whole deck. And that's what makes Commander interesting, is it restricts your deck building a little bit.
See, that to me sounds flavorful.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sounds like story to me. Mm-hmm. And I think I would really enjoy that style of play over I gathered the best cards over this 27,000 card journey. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And mathematically made the deck that's going to stomp everybody. I'm sure there are people that can build a Sauron deck that would stomp everybody, but at least they had to fit a theme.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
And that's where you get into the competitive EDH. CEDH, I like to say everybody's playing with the same 75 cards, and the 25 is what you actually built. Because for competitive EDH, you need a Mana Crypt, you need a Soul Ring, you need a Mana Vault, you need a Mental Misstep. You need that interaction that has to happen.
Got it.
That doesn't mean I dislike the format. I love watching competitive EDH. The interactions they have make me a better player.
Sure.
Because I understand at a higher level what's going on. Do I enjoy playing it? Absolutely fucking not. It's so stressful, and I can't afford it. Competitive EDH deck costs $1,200 to $1,500.
Right. So are there on Twitch, but like us, are there streamers that are streaming games that new players should check out to learn those things that you learn when you watch other people play?
Absolutely. And I'm not going to give anybody credit except for Katie Combat, who was in chat. They run Cardboard Command. Cardboard Combat? Cardboard something. I'll get it right later. But they do 4-player Commander games actually just before we start playing our game on Friday nights.
Oh, nice.
I usually watch them as I'm finishing up work, and then I join you guys and do that. But there's hundreds of Magic the Gathering channels, and every level. There's like casual. There's actually a Twitch channel called Casual Commander, which is just people that just sitting around having a good time.
Nice.
My personal favorite is Spike Feeders, which is just competitive playing, and that's what makes me a better player to watch. If I'm playing, no, because my decks are ridiculous and do crazy shenanigans that I think is fun. Doesn't mean it wins, but I think it's fun.
Sure, and I imagine the more you would watch something like that, the more you'd catch the lingo and stuff. Because I would imagine this, once you're dealing with people who are experienced and have played a long time, the games kind of happen quickly and they're not necessarily describing what they're doing. You don't have a commentator telling you what they're doing.
So one of the things that I do, and I wish more of my playgroup would do, is I say everything I'm doing. And that's not only for their benefit, it's for my benefit.
Sure.
Because let's say, we're looking at Sauron, whenever an opponent casts a spell, amass Orcs 1. If I forget to do that,
it's on you.
Oh well.
It's on you. Right.
Now, you could later go back and say, it doesn't say you may amass Orcs 1, so I have to do it. It's not an option. So, okay, you just cast a spell, quickly I'm going to make a Orc that's, everybody agree it's 4 power. And everybody's like, yeah, that's fine.
Right.
But in the case of, like, competitive play, that's called missing a trigger, and it's a game rules violation. It can cost you a game. So say everything out loud that you're doing, especially because I play online. I play on webcam.
Right.
If you're playing on a webcam, maybe someone can't see the card that you're playing. Read it.
Right.
Spell it.
Right, if you have to. Right.
And if somebody says, hey, what's that do? Tell them. Don't hide information. Everyone's here for a good time. If you're here just to pub stomp your friends, not only are you a bad friend, but you're a bad Magic the Gathering player.
Sure.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So
it's a game. It's a game. There's no reason that your veins should be bursting out of your head and sweat dripping down because somebody counterspelled your winning play.
Right. And I think that's, I think maybe my knowledge and recollection of any of the collectible games I did when I did HeroClix, when I did this and that, was I always enjoyed the playing with friends and theming stuff. And then when I went to a convention and tried to bring my Game of Thrones collectible card game into a tournament and got stomped in round 2, realizing, oh, these people aren't playing for fun, they're playing to stomp every opponent. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could see the difference in play styles.
Correct. And because Magic the Gathering is so near and dear to my heart, and because I've been playing for 2 decades, I decided to make the characters a finding purchase.
Yeah!
These are in no way legal. And they're how I perceived the character. I tried to get as much input as I can from the players. But I wanted to make one of each color of Magic. And that was really tough, because you would think with a bunch of rogues, we're all going to be blue and black. Because that's where rogues go.
Right.
Knowledge and... But no, I did a little a little creative thought today as I was building these, and I dug into some deep-seated Magic knowledge to get some interesting mechanics.
Right.
Scott, if you pull one up, please.
Sure.
I did have one more gameplay type question. I know
Sure.
I waited too long, but so you've got a deck of cards, right? You don't know what's gonna be in your deck, but you mentioned Scry is to look at the top one.
Mm-hmm.
So Sauron could be way down at the bottom. You don't know when he's coming. Is that right?
If you're playing with him in the deck itself and not as the commander. With the commander, they're in a separate command zone, and you can cast them from the command zone at any time.
Gotcha. Okay, so some of them you know, and you can use them whenever. Most of them are just waiting.
In the deck. And there's cards called tutors, where you go look for a certain type of card, and either put it in your hand, or put it on top, or put it in your graveyard, or put it directly on the battlefield.
And I imagine in like serious competitions, there's like a shuffling rule.
Yep.
Yeah.
You shuffle, like you have to completely randomize, and in competitive play, like actual tournaments, your opponent is allowed to shuffle your deck. If you're not comfortable with the opponent shuffling in the deck, they can request a judge come over and shuffle. Because cheating is big. Like, you can look up Magic the Gathering cheating videos where they get caught stacking the deck or slipping a card out of their sleeve. Like,
see, now that's the job I want, is the guy that catches those guys. Just be like, you're out, buddy.
All right, so I would like to first note that at the bottom of the card that I made, I gave the artist credit.
Yes, you did.
So down there at the bottom, it says Jack as the artist. I gave credit to the artist because this is not AI-generated art. This is art created by an artist.
Art created by our very own Jack, who plays in our game and created these lovely portraits of all of our PCs. Jack, I can't thank you enough for that. I mean,
oh man,
it's a personal touch that we have that a lot of other streams don't, and it may not mean anything to anyone outside of the people playing this game, but it means a lot to us. So, thank you.
Absolutely. And you know, it was a lot of fun coming up with them, and I went back and forth with all the players to get their ideas, what color of their clothing, what kind of accoutrement they had strapped to their bodies, and yeah, it was fun. And then I would run something by somebody, and I get a couple tweak suggestions. So each process, each little picture took, I don't know, a few days.
Nice.
Because
they're gorgeous, and I was happy to use them in these mock cards.
Great.
So
all right.
now, speaking of the colors you used and whatnot, like, did this influence your choice of what color you put the card in, Justin, with the blue scarf?
Absolutely not.
Okay, because I think it synergistically looks appealing.
It does. It looks very nice. But, and I'm going to give my reasoning for each of the cards. But when I asked earlier if everyone could tell me like the main character trait, Amanda said Ashrina is tough as fluff. And I thought that was the sweetest, most descriptive, evocative way to say it. So I made that her title. Ashrina, tough as fluff. She's tough on the outside, but really is just a sweetheart. Now, I made these level...
Hey, listen.
The level 1 versions of these characters. So this is, when we're first starting out, this is Ashrina. Ashrina is blue to represent not the knowledge side of it, but the deceitful side.
Oh, okay.
She's a con artist.
Yep.
So rogues are typically blue or black. I chose blue for her because I gave her an ability that if Ashrina Tough as Fluff becomes blocked by exactly one creature, and this is to play into her Swashbuckler. If she's alone, blocked by one creature, you can remove her from combat and draw a card. She pickpockets them.
Nice.
That's cool.
And
nice.
To fit with the flavor and the mana cost, I also said you draw a card and discard a card. So if she's blocked by just one creature, you can take her out of combat, and it's may. You don't have to, but you may take her out of combat and just draw a card. So I made her a little bit of a pickpocket, swashbuckler, and I gave her a higher power than toughness because she's tough as fluff. She does a lot of damage, but she's kind of a pushover.
Nice.
So that's my version of a Shrina. I thought it was very flavorful. It made me smile when I made that mechanic because I thought it really fit the character.
And that's a mechanic, not being a person who plays, that's a mechanic you might experience in the game already or something similar.
Yes.
Right. So you're not like making these wild powers that someone would be like, dude, that's kind of crazy,
No, that is absolutely a mechanic you would see on a blue card.
Right. So that's cool. Awesome.
Let's do the next one.
All right. Switching to our paladin.
Garrick was tough.
I would imagine.
And I'll tell you why. Why Garrick was tough.
He's a 4.
Because he is tough. He's a 4. He is the highest mana cost and the highest toughness of all of our characters.
Is that to represent like his high armor class?
Yes.
Cool.
Actually, he and Tarlin that you'll see later both have a 4 toughness to represent high armor class.
Sure, it makes total sense. Yeah, game mechanic wise, like comparing a D&D mechanic to a Magic mechanic, that makes a lot of sense.
Now, he's green in color, mostly because he's an elf. Right. We mentioned earlier, elves are green.
Okay.
I could see Garrick in white. I could see him in green. I could see him in blue. Garrick is a very well-rounded personality that has a lot of layers. I put him in green because he's an elf and because of his ability of hexproof from black. That means he cannot be targeted by any spells that are black. And black is typically necromancy. I thought that fit.
Absolutely. And black is one of the enemies of green?
Yes.
And that makes sense from the whole, Servant of the Raven Queen. Absolutely.
That goes into the next ability, which is if he becomes blocked or blocks a zombie, skeleton, or vampire, destroy that creature.
Ooh, that's badass.
Smite.
Smite.
Smite undead. There it is. I love it.
He smites undead, and it doesn't matter how big that zombie, skeleton, or vampire is, they dead if he blocks them.
I have to say, I was really freaking worried that either Tarlin or Garrick were just going to go destroy the zombie that was in the little house. I don't want... Spoilers if you haven't watched the last episode of Finding Purchase, but I was really worried about that possibility, and I actually had to spend some time thinking about what if.
I was so close to just turning. Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Yep.
I did give Garrick a higher mana cost, but that's because he has some really strong abilities.
Sure.
Let's go to the next one, which I think will be Kid. And I mentioned earlier, Kid's byline is my favorite. His title that I gave him, it's empty.
Yeah.
It's just Kid. With Kid, I did make him black because rogue. And I think he fits... Assassins are typically black in color. Now, he has an ability we haven't talked about, which is Dash. Dash is an alternate casting cost. So to put him on the battlefield, it costs 2 and a black. Alternatively, I can cast him for his Dash cost, which is black, which means he goes on the battlefield, he has haste, which means he can attack right away, and at the end of your turn, he goes back into your hand.
Ooh.
So my idea there was him jumping in and out of stealth.
Yeah.
So he comes out, he hits hard, he disappears.
Yep.
And then I gave him another ability that when he becomes blocked, he loses 2 power, so he becomes a 1 power creature, but he gets first strike and death touch, which basically says, I kill whatever blocked me. Unless they also have first strike.
Okay, first strike means...
My damage happens first.
Ah, got it.
So in combat, there's declare attackers, declare blockers, first strike damage, regular strike damage, resolution. So
Nice.
because he has first strike and death touch, if you don't have first strike, my damage, I deal 1 to you, and because I have death touch, it's lethal.
Well, that kind of simulates both the sneak attack, obviously, but also the assassin ability to
Auto crit.
have advantage or whatever it is, whatever the assassin ability is. Don't rip me apart out there, people. I don't know everything about every character, but the assassin ability that lets you do extra damage if you go earlier than somebody else or something.
Right.
I had a lot of fun making Kid because I wanted to represent his quick attacks and his stabbing, but I didn't want to just make him, okay, he's a first striker, very boring. So I gave him that quick dash ability, which is actually a new ability, a new mechanic in a recent set.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Let's move on to, obviously the best person in the party.
Of course.
Of course.
Arlen the Magnificent.
Tarlin, Pensive Protector. I gave him a double white pip mana cost, meaning you have to tap 2 planes and a colorless instead of just a single planes and 2 colorless, because his ability is uniquely white. I gave him an ability that Flash means you can cast him at any time, including on other people's turns. And my idea there is you flash him in, and then you put a shield counter on up to 2 target creatures. A shield counter says if damage would be dealt to this creature or it would be destroyed, remove the shield counter instead. So he comes in and he protects either himself and another person or 2 other people. If they're doing... can we pull Ashrina back up? So Amanda just said, no, I missed my card.
I'll pull her up in a second. Finish Tarlin and we'll go back.
Yep. So you put shield counters on in response to big board wipes or anything to protect people. But I also gave him an older cleric ability from older sets, which is not seen a lot anymore. Some of the older 90s clerics had this ability that you would tap them and prevent 1, 2, or 3 damage from any source. And I made it so that it's target creature you control. So he can target himself. Say he's blocking something that has 6 power. Or that's a bad example. 5 power. He has a 4 toughness, but I tap him and prevent 2 of that. So only 3 damage
So he stays
goes
alive.
through. So he stays alive.
Right. So again, dealing with his armor class, with his healing abilities, are all feel like they're encompassed in that, as well as his use of Sanctuary, which he has used to great avail through the campaign. That's great.
Yeah. And I put him at a very low power because he does not deal damage.
No, it's not his role. Right.
I actually thought about making him a 0/5. No damage and just straight, just big old butt because of the full plate.
Well, let me ask you, before we jump back to Ashrina, what skill does Tarlin have, or what ability to do any damage? It seems like it's all protection.
He's used, in fact, he killed the Myriad Leader with Guiding Bolt, which is his only offensive spell.
On the card.
Oh, on here? On the card? Just his 1 power. So his power toughness is 1 power, 4 toughness.
I
So
see.
he could kill something with 1 toughness. If Tarlin blocked Ashrina,
Right.
Ashrina would die, because she's a 3/1 and Tarlin is a 1/4.
Got it.
Right.
But Ashrina has the ability to remove herself from combat. So let's go back to Ashrina. Just for you, Amanda.
There you go, Amanda. We're back on your card. You're the only one that's getting to be seen twice.
Ashrina, Tough as Fluff. 1 and a blue for a 3/1 gnome rogue that if Ashrina, Tough as Fluff becomes blocked by exactly 1 creature, you may remove Ashrina, Tough as Fluff from combat and draw a card because you pickpocket them. If you draw a card, discard a card because you're small and you can't hold everything.
But she's got the bag of holding.
She does have the bag of holding. And again, these were the level 1.
Right.
I might do session 2 where I do 2 color versions that are the level 5 versions.
Nice. Or she just needs to be played in a deck with an item
Bag of hold.
that
Actually,
is a bag of holding item that would actually let her do something like that. That's funny.
this would synergize a lot with the card that's actually called Bag of Holding. Bag of Holding says, if you would discard a card, exile it under Bag of Holding instead.
There you go. That's perfect. See,
Okay.
Ashrina's purse.
All right.
Yeah. But hold on, before you bring Sliver, that means he's red.
Correct.
We haven't seen a red. So tell me what the red means again before we take a look.
So red means so there's a broad spectrum. Red means direct damage. Red means destruction. Red means passion. And the one that I hearkened in on, Brandy actually just called out. Chaos.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
Agent of
and
Chaos.
I will say, Jack, of the 5 cards I made, yours is my favorite.
Oh, really?
If we can bring up Sliver.
Yep, here it is.
Sliver, Impulsive Rapscallion, for 2 and a red. He's a legendary creature human bard, and he has a whole block of text. He's a reader. So he's a 2/2. When Sliver Impulsive Rapscallion attacks, exile the top card of your library. So you're going to flip over the top card of your library and reveal it. If the revealed card is a creature, Sliver Impulsive Rapscallion becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn with the base power of 2/2. So that's to represent Disguise Self.
Disguise Self.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's badass.
If the revealed card is a non-creature, non-land card, you may discard a card from your hand at random, because he's a little clumsy.
It's chaotic, too.
If you do, place the exiled card into your hand. Because sometimes he has exactly the right thing when he needs it. And the last part, because I wanted to give it a drawback, if the revealed card is a land, Sliver goes back to your hand because he runs away.
That's fantastic.
So, my thought process here was, yes, the Disguise Self, the very helpful in a myriad of ways, but also Sliver is impulsive. And red has an ability that's called Impulsive Draw, which is discard a card and then draw a card. And I represented that in the middle with, if it's a non-creature, non-land that you reveal, you can discard a card from your hand at random to pick that card up into your hand.
Yeah, that's...
I really like the design of this. Not just because I made it, but I like it. There are cards similar to this, but not with this specific abilities.
Well, that's really cool.
I would play this.
Now,
It's
yeah.
very chaotic.
Now, this
Well
is
done.
this is I think a great representation of these characters, and you've also spent the forethought to make them legitimate possibilities within Magic, right?
Yes.
But let me ask you this. These are a party of heroes. Could you see building a deck around all 5 of them? Or would the constraints of them being 5 different colors make it really hard?
So it depends. If we're playing, it would make it very hard regardless of format, because you would need lands to
Get
represent
everybody
all the
in,
colors.
Right.
They're all really low cost. They're low drops. What it's called, low drop. It's a low mana value. So, in standard play, you're going to want to put a 1 drop down on turn 1, a 2 drop down on turn 2, a 3 drop down on turn 3. So, if there's some mana acceleration, you might get 2 or 3 out at a time. But let's say I have Sliver and I have a Shrina in my hand, in my opening hand. But I also have a forest, a plains, and a swamp. I can't cast either of them.
Right.
Right.
because I have the 3 other colors. That's where multicolored lands come in, mana fixing, spells that let you change the color of mana that you're casting. Again, everything can be broken.
Right.
And I know we've been talking for an hour and a half, and I've only scratched the surface of the rules of Magic.
You haven't even shown us how to freaking open up your hand and what to do. So that may have to come next time.
Actually playing might be another time entirely, because we don't really have a way to... I could turn on my Discord and show you Magic the Gathering Arena, and we could go through a game. I'm fine with that. I was not prepared to do that, but I have it right here. It's pinned to my taskbar.
Not tonight, but sometime that would be fun.
I think I'd love to, maybe if we can. You said there's virtual ways to play.
Yeah.
If that may be something where we do something like that. Now I know
I'll ship you a deck.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, was that if Jack and I put together decks and you could actually coach us through.
You guys are both
playing
in
each other or something,
You guys are both in Texas, right?
Right, we're in the same region. So
I got some time off coming up.
Hey, we do that. We do it in person.
Or a weekend. I can just load all my EDH decks up into a suitcase and just play around the table.
Yeah. I'd love to do that.
Fun fact, EDH decks, because they're 100 card and sleeved, when you go through TSA, they will require you to open the deck box and flip through the cards, because it's thick enough that the X-ray cannot get through it.
That's funny.
I've had to do that on 2 occasions where they're like, "Oh, you play Magic cards?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Yeah, we know it's nothing, but we have to have you open it.
We have to look. Yep.
We have to look to make sure there's not something between the cards."
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, well, Justin,
you've got thousands of cards too. You've got boxes and boxes, right?
Oh, don't make them show us.
If you're going through if you're going through security.
Those are built decks that he actively plays, is what I'm guessing, because they're right.
This is my Warhammer deck.
They're right next to his computer. Yeah.
Warhammer 40K deck. That one was I have Kibo Uktabi Prince is a monkey and gorilla typal deck. It's all monkeys and gorillas.
Wow.
My favorite pet deck, I say pet deck because it's the one I like playing the most, the one I put the most time in. It's Naya, which is the 3 color. Yeah, every color combination has a name. So Naya is green, white, red. And the idea of the deck, I say it is a group hug deck. It absolutely is not. It is a politics control deck. It uses a mechanic that every player votes for something, or everybody draws a card and something happens. But the bad stuff can't happen to me when those happen. So, like, I have a card that says, when it enters the battlefield, starting with you, choose an artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Destroy all chosen artifacts and enchantments. Well, starting with... And it can't be one of yours. So, if there's 4 players, 4 things are getting blown up, and none of them are mine. Group hug.
Well, yeah, thanks enough. I can't thank you enough, Justin, for putting this together. You're obviously a wealth of knowledge on this, and I feel like I understand the gist of it. I don't think I would win my first 12 games, but unless maybe it's first Jack, where.
I'm pretty sure that would be a quick victory.
But my point being is that I feel like I know enough, and demystifying any of our hobbies, I think, is smart. For people out there who seem interested but don't know how to do it. It's the same thing about getting into D&D or any role-playing game. So I really appreciate you doing that and doing it with such vigor. I mean, you made cards, for Christ's sake. I mean, Jesus.
If anybody out there listening, if you ever want to play a game of Commander, hit me up on Discord. Nice. Join our Discord, send me a message and hanging out. Say, hey, let's get on webcam and, let's sling some cards. I will absolutely play with you. I love playing Magic. It is one of my absolute deepest passions because it does scratch that type A logic that I adore. I love puzzle solving. I see deck building as puzzle solving. And I have one final trivia question for you guys.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
If you were to print out the comprehensive rulebook for Magic the Gathering, how many pages would it be? 8.5 by 11 pages.
The comprehensive rule book, meaning including all of the true definitions of those words that you were showing us.
Correct.
Right?
Every
Holy
possible
crap.
rule.
Is there a correct answer to this question?
Yes, I looked it up before stream.
Okay, hold on. Now, since all rules can be broken, I'm thinking, Scott, that maybe there's no rules and it would be 0. But that can't be true because
You got to have this
even-
written down somewhere, right? Like
Yeah.
somewhere it has to. We can't just trust that Justin knows, even though we trust Justin knows that dash means what dash means, right? Dash
Right.
had to be written somewhere at some point in time when it was created, and
Mm-hmm.
those rules have been collectively gathered somewhere.
Actually,
But
that brings up another thing that I know both of you will enjoy. Shadowfax.
Oh yeah,
What
Okay.
does Shadowfax do? Shadowfax, show me the meaning of haste, right?
yeah, right.
Oh.
Haste's rules have not been printed on a card since the 90s. They printed them on Shadowfax.
Nice.
Because Shadowfax
Wow.
shows the meaning of haste.
That's great. That's fantastic. All right, so I'm going to go with. I'm thinking of like a generic. I'm thinking of like the player's handbook is 300 pages,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking
But hold
this
on.
game has been around for a very long amount of time.
30 years, 27,000 different cards. Hopefully not all of them have an individual thing ability.
Right. So you gotta think that out of that 27,000, 50% of them probably are land cards that don't have any new rules or whatever.
Right.
Well, who knows?
Right.
I'm not even going to hazard that guess, but I'm going to say to print out all the possible rules of the game would be 1,000 pages.
Wow. Now hold on. I guess nobody's saying anybody on Earth is going to read this document because if it's 1,000 pages long,
It is not 1,000 pages long, but yes, people have to read this document. In order to become a judge, and there are 5 levels of judges, you have to study this document.
okay. So all right, you at least gave us a ballpark. It's not 1,000 pages.
It is less than 1,000, I will say that.
Okay, Scott.
I took my guess. Go ahead, take your guess.
And you say a player's handbook. Let me pull one out. It's a roughly 250, 300. Front and back print. 8.5 by 11.
Yep.
Jeez, 27. It seems ridiculous. But if people have to read it, I'm going to say 350 pages.
You're close. It's 281 pages.
Wow, Scott was actually closer.
No, I had said 1,000. You're closer.
Yeah, but with your original guess of a player's handbook.
Well, I
And-
use that as a basis for what, that was written and produced once, and then they've added all the other books that we add on to the player's handbook, right?
That's true. That's true.
And a new Magic set comes out approximately one every 3 months. So
Now,
you're
in a new
adding
Magic
to
set,
that.
in a new Magic set, what's the typical size number of cards, unique cards in a new set?
It varies.
Okay.
You're gonna have more reprints of older cards, or typical cards. Like there's some cards that are in every set that just constantly get reprinted because they're solid cards for limited play. Limited play being draft, where you take a card, pass the pack, take a card, pass the pack, and you build a deck based off what you pulled out of a pack. There's sealed, which is you open 6 packs and build a deck with what you opened.
Wow.
So you have to have some of the standard cards. You also have to have some of the lower powered stuff
Right.
to accommodate for all that. So I honestly don't know. Somewhere between 40 and 150 new cards.
What does a standard new package look like? How many cards come if you say, all right, I'm
15
buying
cards.
this new set? 15?
15 cards in I think they're $8 now, pack.
Okay, so you can't play with one pack. How much does that Lord of the Rings box cost?
That Lord of the Rings box that I bought was $59, and it came with 8 packs, 50 basic lands to build your deck with, a die, and it also had probably the most powerful card printed in Magic that is hotly debated, and everybody wants to ban it: the One Ring.
Ooh.
Well, at least they're making that the most powerful card in the game.
Yes, but it immediately impacted professional, like Pro Tour level. The immediate Pro Tour following Lord of the Rings, every deck except one in the entire tournament was running 4 copies of the One Ring. So they made it too powerful.
I don't want to know what people had to spend to get that, because I imagine it's pretty rare.
I would, if I see these Lord of the Rings sets like at a Target, this $50 pack, I would buy it for that one card because I would make my money back.
Oh,
Wow.
there's a guaranteed copy of it?
There's a guaranteed the One Ring in those. They're called fat packs.
God, now I gotta go to Walmart.
You probably won't find the Lord of the Rings ones because it's been a couple months. But I saw one at the Target near me just 2 weekends ago, and I almost bought it.
Wow.
The kids talked me out of it so that I would buy them something.
Well, good on them.
It's funny. Anytime we go to the Magic card store or anything, they look at me and go, "Don't you have enough?" And it's like, you're my children. Stop that. Don't you have enough Magic cards? No.
That's a Magic card store. Is that all they sell?
So there's one locally called Cool Stuff, which is actually one of the biggest Magic the Gathering card game vendors in the U.S. It's actually right up the road from me. They sell Magic cards, Pokemon trading cards, Yu-Gi-Oh trading cards, the new Disney game, Lorcana, that's becoming huge and expensive. But talking about the One Ring, there's something they did unique with this Lord of the Rings set that, again, split the community, like everything does. They made serialized cards. So they made a set of One Rings, or actually Soul Rings, in Elvish. They made one in Dwarvish. And there were only 500 of those printed. And it would be 1 of 500 or 37 of 500, like this serialized number on them. Well, they also made a One Ring. They made a 1 of the One Ring, written in Elvish, full art, foiled. Only one was ever printed, one was ever created. Now, do you know why this was the best-selling set of Magic? People were tearing them off the shelves trying to get this one card. Because before the set dropped, a collector in Spain offered $2 million for it.
Okay. And has it been found?
It has. It was found by a card shop in Canada that was mass opening decks to fill up their product. They found it. And they sold it to a celebrity.
All right, Scott, you don't have to go out there and start raking them off the shelves.
If you are interested in acquiring said serialized 1 of One Ring, you need to go talk to Post Malone, who is a huge Magic the Gathering player.
No kidding.
I had heard that story. I didn't know what the card was he was seeking, but I knew he was seeking a card from the new set. So
I think the story says it was $2.5 million that he bought it for.
Wow.
And he has the money that he would actually put it in a deck and like shuffle and play it, which is crazy to me. That would go in a vault.
Right. Right.
Of course.
Somebody spills their Mountain Dew on it.
But there are a lot of big name people that play Magic the Gathering.
Oh yeah,
you'd be surprised. I know football players that are on some of the streams I watch that play. Some musical artists. If you've watched Cobra Kai, Hawk, the kid with the mohawk, is a huge Magic the Gathering player. And he taught another one of the players, the main character in Blue Beetle, now plays Magic the Gathering too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty crazy. Magic is huge.
Back in the late 90s, I worked a job on a college campus in the summertime on Long Island, where I went into the dorm rooms and we collected all the phones out of the dorm rooms and cleaned them and put them back in the dorm rooms. It was the silliest summer type job in the world, but it was on the college campus where the New York Jets practiced. And there were linemen playing Magic the Gathering in the dorm rooms.
Yes.
Between practice sessions. I was like, holy cow.
And
it's
every
fun,
one of those linemen could beat me in Magic the Gathering.
Exactly. And football.
Yeah,
That's just
sure.
not fair.
Right?
All right, guys, I need to run. So it was blast talking to you, and I look forward to doing this again when we're going to make more characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
As I'm wrapping up, just want to give a couple of announcements. Next week, we do not have Dicey Decisions. Too many people are traveling. So just like this week, there will be no Finding Purchase. I don't even think there's enough people to scrape together one of these, although that may change. Look out for that on our social media if something's going to happen next Friday night. If not, I'm going to stream our premiere episode. I might even stream our session 0 and just send that to play during our normal streaming slot. Something will be in the normal slot next Friday night, but it will not be our normal offerings for another week because several of us have prior commitments. But we will be back at it the second week. I guess that would be the 17th of November will be our next session of Finding Purchase. Once again, thanks, Justin. This was fantastic.
I had a lot of fun.
Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, this was
Jack,
informative at the very least.
And I hope you people enjoyed the stream. We will catch you guys on the flip side.